Let's get ready to RPG! 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 RPG!
Hello, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. Hopefully everyone is doing well. It is Saturday. And I'm not gonna lie, I had Chinese food for dinner. I had some chicken curry and a little fried rice. And about 3.5 minutes ago, 4 minutes ago, man, I just suddenly got hit with the major sleepies. So I apologize if I feel, I got to get the stream going, but I was like, oh man, I just want to take a nap. Which can happen to me sometimes when I have like a very, a lot of rice, carb heavy meal like that. Or maybe it's just a Chinese food thing, but I don't know. Probably not. It's like a, Thanksgiving dinner thing too, I guess. But again, it wasn't like the chicken curry, it's mostly just chicken and vegetables. So kind of a little bit of spice. Pretty good though. Well, hopefully everyone is doing well. Excuse me if I'm a little, but the good news is we do have a white monster energy. So hopefully that'll keep us going. But yeah, I don't know how long tonight's stream is going to be, but we'll try to see if we can actually get something done. But I'm in no rush. You shouldn't be in a rush here. Junderlin Games, what's up, Junderlin? All hail the Shell Father. Long live to she who spreads. Glory to Shadowdeep. Well, okay, but so here's the problem. How can you hail the Shell Father, but also hail she who spreads in the same statement? Because she who spreads is the natural enemy of the Shell Father. So, just saying. she who spreads and the hard god, mortal enemies, right? So, just saying, it seems like you are you're playing more sage. Yeah, some sort of centrist pilgrim, some sort of weird doist. What do they call those? Not doist. What's a religion with two primary deities? Oh man, it's not duology, is it? What's the word? You guys are smart. You'll know what a word is. Some sort of creator god, destroyer god kind of mythology. Let's see here. I live for chaos. Get off my ass. No, I'm not. You made a statement and now it has set things in motion. We'll see what happens here. What is up, everybody? What's up, Boothby? Good to see you. Dualistic. All right, dualistic. All right. Duotheistic. All right, I like that word. Dualistic, duotheistic, something like that. Well, there you go. You don't have to do it in silence, Shudrum. Yeah, I don't know that what I'm going to be talking about is going to be particularly helpful, but we can both pretend that it will be. Hopefully the Tunnels and Troll folks were happy. I would hope so. I mean, we haven't got, again, it's the weekend over there, but so I imagine they're going to be busy wrapping up their stuff. But I mean, again, just from self-reporting from members of the Patreon, I think we did well over $1,000 just from us from the Knights of Last Call. So, and from my admittedly very, very sketchy research, which is to say ChatGPT, I found that if marketing folks, if they can make an investment, if they can get an ROI of 2x or 3x, it's considered okay. Anything above 3x is considered fantastic. So I mean, if we're pushing 1,500, 1,600, 1,700, okay, we're then they got their money's worth. I would hope so. What's up, Borgie? Thank you for the 11-month sub on Prime. Appreciate it. Almost a year link. They're fantastic. Grim Prism, what's up? It's been so long since you caught a stream. Whole life has been good to you. Yeah, it's been okay. I mean, relatively speaking, it's been a year since my life got flipped, turned upside down. But if you'd like to take a minute and just sit right there, I'll tell you how I became the Prince of the Losers. No, I don't know. We're all here. What's up, Shu? I don't know, Chris. I mean, there's a lot of decisions to still be made. One of which is this entire thing going to be one gigantic joke and meme. That is one option that we could certainly go with. I don't know if we want to go with this, but we could go entirely for jokes and memes. That is definitely an option. Okay. Well, tonight I want to at least try to do one thing. I mean, there's a million things I want to do, but one thing I want to try to do, because it's really important to systems and how I want to decide things. And it's just sort of also, a lot of it's going to be, you folks here, believe it or not, you guys are, because it bothers me, but there's no right way, right, to do anything. And that's annoying because it'd be cooler if there was, but there isn't, so we unfortunately have to deal with this imperfect world where things can be, whatever we want them to be. So let me get the whiteboard up. So, yeah. So here's the deal. Let me go over to the dark mode. Yeah, no dots today. We don't need the dots. So here's the deal for tonight. Or I should say in general. And we'll probably go back to the PDFs here in a minute. There we go. Come on. Activate. Turn on. Did I turn it off? No, I turned it off. There we go. It's turning on. What's up, Jackal? P is almost certainly not equal to P. That is NP, correct. That is definitely correct. So basically, one of the so I guess one of the core decisions that I want to make is how to do time/tension pressure in Shadowdeep. Now, the reason this is such an important decision is because in a dungeon, particularly in a dungeon, the overwhelming the thing that pushes on you more than anything is this idea that the longer you stay in the dungeon, that the riskier things get. And historically, this meant dwindling resources and it meant random encounters or wandering monsters. So as time passed by, you would start to run out of these things. And so it creates this pressure clock, okay? And the way that the game handled this was that it used this idea of torches and it used this idea of spell durations. All these resources were slowly dwindling to kind of light a fire under your ass. And then, of course, obviously punishment in the form of random encounters and wandering monsters. Okay, so taking a step back from that, we need to decide what is the way that we want to handle random encounters and wandering monsters. And more importantly than that, do I want to do it differently than the way that Shadowdark does it? Which is really the kind of the core of this question. Now, we had one of our favorite regular viewers here. Shout out to I think it's Lugs Gaming. I think it was Lugs Gaming. Maybe it was Lugs Gaming. Who doesn't love everything that we do here, but they're a fan. They watch. And she says, I love the first 3 PDFs. Yeah, we got Shadowdark, Heroic Deeds, Fabula Ultima, Tunnels and Trolls. We've got the Nimble Dungeoneering Rules, Hackmaster Basic, The One Ring, Vagabond, The One Ring Moria, The One Ring, Battle Zoo Ancestries, the Vagabond, another Vagabond, another version of Shadowdark for some reason, Wilder Feast, Oathhammer, Nimble, Elemental Storm from Roll for Combat, Fantasy Age, Grimwild, Forbidden Lands, Dragonbane, C1, The Hidden Shrine of Tomoe-chan, Fabula Ultima, looks like, it's the Bestiary, yep, and then we got all the pumpkin spice stuff, so that's what's up on this. So I'm looking for this post, or this message that I had. It's a comment on one of my videos. Here we go. And again, every opinion here is valid. I mean, I'm even shouting it out on a stream. Lugs Gaming said, I'd avoid adding a bunch of bespoke rules to your mega dungeon. Adding a bunch of gamey elements is anti-OSR. Sticks, we were talking about carrots and sticks. Sticks work best anyways. When players leave the dungeon, simply restock it when they're gone. Add extra random encounters, rival adventuring parties, move in to take advantage of a half-clear dungeon. That's how you do this naturally, even though we're discussing adding random encounters, which is not naturally. The OSR and Shadowdark community will certainly reject the modern gaming elements that you are trying to add into the game. And I actually responded to this because Lugs is a regular viewer of mine. I said, gamey elements like real-time torches and dungeon crawling turns, which are in Shadowdark. I said procedural games like BXD&D are already pretty gamey. And then they responded and they said, at Knights of Last Call, true. But the more you add, the more immersion is killed And without immersion, you are not playing a TTRPG. You're playing a board game or a storytelling game like PBTA, Dread, Charades, or Blades in the Dark. Every time a gamist element is added, immersion becomes that much harder to achieve. Also, if you don't need to add a bunch of extra rules and gamist stuff, then you're not really even playing Shadowdark any longer. The goal should be embracing raw Shadowdark and building to suit that experience. Now, so to be clear, I did have a couple of Knights of Last Call members and fans and commenters. Panic Satanic said PBTA and B. They said PBTA and BITD. And I said checks notes. Those aren't role-playing games. And they said that's certainly one of the takes of all time. And then Edward correctly identified says at Lugs, but Derek hates immersion. And obviously people do know me. So what's interesting? Single Bean says no. This is live on my YouTube. This is on my in the comment section of one of my YouTube videos. Now, to be clear, I don't think that Lugs is necessarily wrong. In that, certainly Shadowdark does not have a lot of gamist elements. What I think is that what they're wrong though is I certainly think that they're wrong that without immersion you're not playing a TTRPG. In fact, I argue that I think having gamist elements, and again, we talk. I don't want to turn this into a philosophy thing, but we talk about the difference between immersion, right, versus engagement. Okay. And I don't really care, or actually, I don't really even like immersion, and I don't really care if my players are immersed. What I do care is if people are engaged. Right. I think that's a far more tangible goal that we can go for. And, I think it's kind of silly to a certain extent to look at something like a Megadungeon or a dungeon in any capacity where, where you're getting XP for gold, and to think of that in any sort of immersive sense. Which is to say that it's already fundamentally a gamist conceit, right? It is a gamist environment designed so that you can play the dungeon crawling game, right? So I don't necessarily think that. Now I will argue. I won't argue. I should say that I do think that a lot of the OSR community is very hyped up about this idea of immersion, and even to the point where it's like, it's not really about creating a good game, right? It's about creating strong vibes, right? A strong mental space, and if the game is so, right, who cares? The problem is, and I know that this is probably maybe a hot take, but I think that's kind of like a movie, right, which has a lot of great, visuals, but really bad writing, or isn't really actually a good movie. It might be entertaining, okay? It might be a fun movie. It might be an entertaining movie, but it's not actually a good movie, right? And so, which isn't to say that that's necessarily a bad thing, right? People have fun in different ways. But, I think that there's value in an engaging game experience. It is in the name, role-playing game. But I do think that Lugs makes a valid point, which is that if these OSR games, these Shadowdark games, don't have a lot of rules. Now, that being the case, I think it's a mistake to assume that that there aren't any there aren't any rules because there aren't any gamist elements, because when we look at Shadowdark, I mean, it has some obviously pretty strong gaming elements like real-time torches and the like. So let's take a look at the actual random encounter rules in Shadowdark. Okay? And then we will contrast them. Now, to be clear, the easiest thing, let me be very, very, very frank about something here. In any situation, okay? The easiest thing to do in almost any situation would just be to just use whatever they have. And that goes beyond just Shadowdark. It goes to any game. Because, you know, sure, I might be calling this a Shadowdark Megadungeon, but there's nothing stopping you from using it with BX or Nimble or Heroic Deeds or Trespasser or 5th edition D&D. So, you know, saying that it needs to be tied to one particular system, I think is a little bit, you know, silly. But, so here what we have here is, now, in Shadowdark, again, we have this gamist concept called the crawling round. Now, I don't know why she did this, but in Shadowdark, there is this idea of rounds, which are used both for dungeon crawling, but also combat. So when a fight breaks out, you use combat rounds. Otherwise, you are using crawling rounds. Characters are in crawling rounds when they are not in combat. They are exploring and talking and engaging with the environment. And I should point out that in Shadowdark, rules as written, you are still in initiative order. Okay? When you sit down to play Shadowdark, you are in turn order right from the start. This is rules as written Shadowdark. Okay? At the beginning of the game, presumably meaning the game session, you roll initiative, and then the person with the highest turn or the highest total takes the first turn, and we move clockwise around the table from that. Now, it does mention that it doesn't need to be strict. Some GMs keep only a loose round robin, allowing the players to decide their turn order and actions and before circling back to the GM's turn. So there is this very procedural element here where every player, right, gets a turn. And then the GM takes a turn after every player takes a turn. Okay? That is the way that it is theoretically written in this game. Now, what's not entirely, clear at sometimes is, the difference in terms. Now, what's you don't know what's hard about this? Well, the reason is that by calling them rounds, by calling them both rounds, this is why in original D&D Sweet Threat, they called them rounds and turns. A turn was 10 minutes, and a round was 30 seconds or something, or whatever, 6 seconds, 10 seconds a minute. It was a shorter amount of time because the idea was that in outside of combat, why are we doing things in 6-second increments, right? It doesn't really seem to make any sense. But in any case, when we are inside of crawling rounds, there we go. Every 3 rounds, if it is unsafe, every 2 rounds, if it is risky, and every round, if it is deadly, we roll a d6, and on a roll of a 1, we might get a random encounter. You also might check if the encounters create a loud disturbance. So this is the most basic thing that has existed since time immemorial. It is basically the rules from this version of the game. And obviously in this version of the game, you make a check every 2 turns, which is to say every 20 minutes that you are in the dungeon. And on a roll of a 1 on a d6, then you have a wandering monster. And then you roll on the table. At the end of every 2 turns, you roll a d6. And on a roll of 1, they would appear. So that's like, that's the time. That's how random encounters have been handled since time immemorial. Now, that works. It's fine. It sort of pushes you and pressures you to keep on the movement. Excuse me, I'm very burpy. Hey, Forgotten, thank you so much for subscribing with Prime. Appreciate you. What's up, Laughing? Good to see you. So now, Avison says, are you a fan of random encounter checks timing being adjustable based on how the party acts? I am. Because I have done different things in different times. I see someone, was mentioning about, different some dice pool systems and things like that. Now, I have used, because Angry GM, I know exactly what you're talking about. The tension pool from Angry GM, that article from a long time ago, that was actually taken from a different game. It was actually taken from the Doom pool from a very bad RPG, the Marvel Superheroes RPG. Sorry, Marvel Superheroes. But it was called the Doom pool, as in like Doctor Doom, but as in Doom. And the idea was that it was sort of the opposite of a diminishing return pool or diminishing pool. It was a pool that built up. Now, I used this when I was playing Dungeon Time Extreme, which was my 5th edition dungeon crawling game that I ran for Bob and Smith and a bunch of other my friends. And, this is kind of an essay about basically, kind of quote unquote gamist materials. The idea was that I had a dice tray in front of my GM screen. And when the players, when things would happen, when the players would do things, fail checks, spend time, you name it, I would put dice, into the dice pool. And the thing is sometimes I would add, again, it was Dungeon Time Extreme. I didn't really have a rule, so I just kind of winged it. Sometimes I would add more dice. I would add a bunch of D6s. Now, granted, I'm not suggesting this. This is just the way I did it because I was kind of a YOLO, whatever we do. But sometimes again, a lot of a Dungeon Time Extreme was like me just sort of like going with what felt right, but not using behind the scenes curtain GM shit, but like using mechanics to express a core concept. So what do I mean? Like one time, like the player did something and it was really assholey, and I remember just like putting a D12 into the pool instead. Anyways, so the idea was that every so often, I think it was every 2 dungeon turns, right, which is 20 minutes, I would roll the pool, of dice. And the idea was that depending on where they were, there was a threshold. Now, I'm not suggesting that this is a good system at all. I'm not. What I'm trying to indicate to you is just sort of an idea of how these things can change and how they could feel different. So, depending on where they were, there was a certain level that would trigger a random encounter, right? So maybe it's like if I roll 20 or more, or if I roll 30 or more in, a particular area. Maybe this is a really dangerous area if I roll 10 or more, right? Or I should say dangerous/crowded, right? It might be a better way to describe it, because the chance of a random encounter, we associate it with danger, but really we should associate it with like how busy is this, right? Like if you think about Moria is very deadly, right? But we shouldn't be checking for random encounters every round in Moria, right? Moria is extremely empty. So I worked in insurance for a long time. And when we think in insurance, we think of in terms of 2 ways. We think of frequency, but then we also think of severity, right? So, And in fact, I'm actually putting away my gamist hat here for a second. I'm kind of putting on a simulationist hat. And I'm kind of saying there's kind of two things that we're trying to model here, which is how often do you have a random encounter? And then when you do have a random encounter, how bad is it? Okay. So to put it another way, if we're entering into a kobold, a kobold cavern system that is swarming with kobolds like a boiling anthill, you might want to make a lot of random encounter checks because the chance that you're going to encounter something is very high. But when you do encounter something, it's probably just going to be, I don't know, a bunch of kobolds or, a pet lizard or something, fairly benign on the grand scheme of things. On the other hand, when you're in Moria, okay, you might only make a random encounter check, once a day or once every half day, because it is mostly just empty. But if you do make a random encounter check, okay, when you do make a random encounter check, if you have one, it can be really bad. So that is an example of low frequency, high severity. It makes some amount of sense of what we're trying to argue here. Anyways, so in Dungeon Time Extreme, as the party spent more time in a place, or when they would, leave signs of their passing, or when they would get into a fight, or if they'd make a lot of noise, or whatever, I would add, dice to this pool in front of me. And then every so often, like I said, I think it was every 2 turns, which in game time is every 20 minutes, I would roll the pool of dice in front of me. Okay. And, if they could see it, I would roll it in I would pick up all the dice inside of the dice tray. I would roll them. Okay. And if it reached that threshold, okay, it would trigger an attack, a random encounter. But if it triggered, so I'm going off. I'm going off into another tangent here, but I'm trying to stay focused. I know it's really hard, but bear with me. I'll describe the system first, okay, and then we'll go from there. So I'm trying to remember exactly what I did. So if a random encounter, okay, occurred, I'm trying to think of exactly how it worked. If a random encounter occurred, the number of dice in the pool would be greatly diminished. I don't remember. I don't think it went empty, but it was greatly diminished, for lack of a better word. Okay, it was greatly diminished. However, if I rolled the dice, okay, and no random encounter occurred, any dice that rolled a 1, I would remove from the pool. Okay, so it was kind of like an early version in a weird way of a diminishing pool. So what is this really doing? Okay, well, here's the problem. Here's the problem from a gamist perspective that I have with the standard 1974, 1981 random encounter rules. And if you've run D&D or if you've run a lot of dungeons, okay, you know that this is true. Or at least maybe you know it's true, but you don't actually know it, like you've never thought about it, okay? Here's the problem, the core problem that this process here generates, okay? And you might say, well, this isn't a problem. This is a good thing. It makes the game realistic in a simulation. And I don't even know if it really does that, okay? But here's the core. I believe in you, whiteboard. There we go. Here's the core issues that this thing is potentially generating. Okay, so the first is it has no, by default, by raw, it has no reflection of player actions or agency. Okay? It's just this sort of immutable thing that kind of thrums in the background. Okay? Now, I can already hear you saying, oh, Derek, no. Like, if the players are really cautious, maybe you roll a D8 instead of a D6. Maybe you roll a D10 instead of a D6. Cool. But you do see how that is gamist. You do see how you're changing the rule, right? Like, you can't have it both ways. You know, you can't be like, you can't change the rule. Oh, I would totally change the rule all the time. Like, pick a lane. So one of the things that I like about a dungeon is, for me, it is the piece de resistance of player agency. It's all about being very upfront and communicating. And remember, for me, player agency is the players need to be informed and knowledgeable, and they need to take meaningful actions that can affect it. So I like that, something like a dungeon pool, whatever you want to call it. Doom pool is what I traditionally call it, because that was the first game that I actually saw it from. I don't even know if I have it on my shelf, but it was the Marvel game based off of, I think Cam Banks wrote it. I think it's just called the Marvel Superheroes RPG. I didn't think it was particularly good, but besides the fact, it didn't even have rules for making your own character. You had to play as a Marvel superhero. It was like all designed about just like specifically playing out Marvel characters. Anyways. So I like that as the players take actions, it updates and it can change what's happening. The second thing is, someone mentioned tension. I like the building tension. We've talked before about, in my opinion, for me, the importance of the sort of the fiction being reflected in the mechanics. And I know, a lot of people see mechanics and they think, oh, that means it's gamist. And I actually disagree. I actually think what is more of a problem in RPGs is where GMs will describe something in the fiction and it doesn't actually matter. All right? Like, they'll say something is happening, but then it doesn't really make a difference to the dice roll. You know what I mean? It doesn't really change anything. So I like that these mechanics sort of reflect this, and as the danger grows, the players can quite literally see this pool of dice sort of growing. Okay? Now, the third problem is this table, this process, and I know that I've had this. You may have had this happen to you in your campaigns. I've had entire sessions, okay, 0 random encounters. Because you just might not ever roll a 1. On the other hand, I've also had back-to-back-to-back encounters. Now, this is where I kind of put on my gamist hat. Because in a certain circumstance and in a certain way, these things could be sort of true, in the simulation. But from a gamist perspective, okay, I don't think either of these is particularly a good outcome. Random encounters are neat when they are when they occur at a random frequency, because I don't want it to literally be like, okay, every 4 turns you get a random encounter. All right, that's not really cool, because then it's just like clockwork. Okay, that's not really exciting. On the other hand, if it's literally completely random, okay, then you could go the entire session and never have a single one. Or you could have 1 on 1 on 1 on 1 on 1 on 1. Now, Avison says, is this based on the presumption that the encounter is always a fight? No, not in my logic. The reason I bring this up is because random encounters are expressly something different from the player's intended agency, right? A random encounter is something that the players, in sense, are trying to actively avoid. It could be viewed as a form of punishment, particularly in an old school game where, like Shadowdark, where you don't really get experience points, for the just having a random encounter. Now, yeah, sure, maybe it's a negotiation, maybe it's another thing, but the key is most of the time it's going to be a problem, because to be clear, we are talking about a dungeon environment here. Most creatures are going to be presumably, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Hostile, or mostly hostile. So Francois says, so like a clock that advances around. I do see there's some other chats here. I'm sorry I missed them, but yes. So it's not necessarily a clock, but I did say it's like a reverse diminishing pool. Okay, and I'm sorry if I said that. Diminishing pools were from Grimwild, and diminishing pools were this idea. Instead of using a clock to count things down, is you used a pool of D6s, and every time you would trigger the clock, you would roll the D6s, and some of the dice in the pool would decay. And basically, it was a way to prevent the mathing the clock out. For example, I have played games like Blaze in the Dark or other games where I've had a clock which has been very visible to the players, and it's an 8 clock, and they go, okay, this is when this fills up, the gang attacks them. And they look at the clock and they go, okay, it's 5 of 3. We still have 3 segments left. Okay, we'll be fine, right? They mentally say we'll be fine because we know we have 3 spaces left. And the amount of ticking that occurs is, it's pretty non-random. So what I would prefer is that we get something that's like, well, every 3 to 8 turns, we have an encounter. And having an encounter 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 is impossible. But also it's impossible that we'll go the entire session and never have an encounter. Okay, so that you set up this sort of growing threat. And this is what I said. This is what I did in Dungeon Time Extreme, where let's say that the DC for the area that you were in was 20. Okay, and I add a D6 to the pool. Okay. And then I add another D6 to the pool, okay? And then the encounter triggers. I don't even bother to roll them because, the DC is 20. Or maybe the players haven't figured out what the DC is. That could be a cool thing for the players to sort of figure out. Like eventually they know how dangerous an area is. But basically there's no chance. Okay, so that's after the first 20 minutes. Now, as I said before, maybe the players do something, they make a big noise, it's a loud noise, and so then I add 2d6 to the pool. Okay, plus more time passes. So now we have 5d6 in the pool. Okay, so now at the 40-minute mark, 4 turns, I roll the 5d6. Now there's a good chance, that's not great, but there's a good chance I could roll the DC 20. Okay, I don't. But you can see how as time passes and as tension passes, this pool is going to eventually have enough dice that we are going to for sure hit this DC 20. But like I said, when that happens, that tension should collapse. Now, where am I going with this? Well, this has always been something that I've believed is true, but it was really made apparent to me from the game Dread, right? Which is the game with the Jenga tower. And the cool thing about Dread is that as you pull more and more blocks out of the tower, remember, if the tower falls, someone dies. They fail and they die. And basically, instead of dice rolls, instead of D20 rolls in Dread, if you do something and the GM thinks it's a challenging thing that could involve failure, he'll ask you or she'll ask you instead to pull a brick from the tower. If you pull the brick from the tower and put it back on the top of the tower and the tower doesn't fall, congratulations, you passed your test. If the tower falls, your character dies. But what's cool about this is that if you look at a time, chart of a Dread session, and you look at the tension, the tension starts off pretty low, and people start pulling bricks, from the Dread tower. It's not that big of a deal. You can pull a lot of books, all the easy blocks from the Jenga tower. And then at some point, okay, the tension starts to skyrocket because now the tower is at that point where it's got a bunch of, one piece stacked on one piece stacked on one piece, and it might even be swaying a little bit, and you're trying to find the easy piece to remove, and there's none to be found. And here's the thing, like a horror movie, like this is building and building and building this tension. But what story writers, novel writers, and again, I'm not a huge simulationist guy, so I want to create experiences, right? Not simulations. Real life is kind of boring. At some point, they know that you have to break this tension, because if you don't break this tension, it is unsustainable. And what I've noticed time and time again is that eventually the tower collapses. And there's this, kind of, oh no, so-and-so just got eaten by the werewolf. But there's also this kind of like, oh, this kind of sigh of relief. Now people can, crack their next soda, or run to the bathroom real quick, or you get this chance to sort of take a break. And actually what Dread does, which is actually really smart, is actually when you rebuild the tower, you actually rebuild it, but you start with a few bricks already pulled. So it doesn't reset it to this level, it resets it to this level. Okay, and then the tension starts to build up again, and then it collapses back down. But like at each time it collapses down, okay, you can see that it's not collapsing down as far, but there's still this local minimum. Okay, and that pattern, right, continues until the end of the session. And this is in movies, this is in novels, good novels, good movies. And I think it makes for good gaming sessions. And I think that in some ways, what I want a sort of random encounter system to be like, in some ways, is to be a bit like this Dread Tower, right? And to create this pattern, this sort of jagged, this sort of jagged, increasing linear trend, jagged sawtooth pattern of tension increasing. Oh my God, it's getting dangerous. Then the encounter happens, the tension resets, and we keep building and building and building and building, and then the tension resets and keeps building and building and building. Because again, the longer you spend in the dungeon, I think it should get more and more and more and more dangerous, right? The deeper you get, the closer to the good treasure you get. The monster is hunting you in the darkness. It's got your scent. It's only a matter of time before it finds you. That's that kind of visceral horror. Now, is that immersion? Yeah, I think so. But in my personal experience, I think as a player playing a game where we are using dice and hit points and armor classes to decide things, I think looking in the GM's doom pool and seeing that sort of building tension physically represented by a pile of dice is a very powerful thing. Now, so I think that's where I'm kind of going for this. All right, so I'm going to try to catch up with chat. Hey, we just had a super chat from Nimble. Hopefully it pops up in the chat. I didn't see it so far. Maybe it'll, hopefully, maybe. I see this as seeing it coming. That's where the fun is. What's going on? All right, maybe it's just delayed. All right, well, Nimble, I can check my actual YouTube log. Let me see something here real quick. Oh, okay, I think my okay, because it's just not working. I'll try to reset that. All right, so all right, we had a super chat from Nimble who said, yes, you need to do that much better. Now, it's funny that Nimble says, yes, you need to do that much better. Okay. And at the same time, Chris Roberts says, the dice pool DC system sounds like too much addition. Now, so we have two people saying completely different things. Now, to be clear, I'm not suggesting necessarily that my system is the one that should be used exactly as I described it. That's what I did in my Dungeon Time Extreme game because I thought that was, appropriate. I don't know what happened. My stream ninja is like crashing. All right, hold on a sec, guys. Let me try to reset my stream ninja. It lost the chat. Right. Okay. Test. Okay, it seems like it's back. Okay, sorry if I missed your guys' chat. So I apologize because I had to reset everything and it wasn't working. I've been having this, it's been kind of flaking out of me lately. Junderlin was saying the underclock, you roll a standard D6 subtracting from a 20, okay? At 0, a random encounter occurs. It said that you could increase or decrease the dice size based on the same happens in the game. Okay, so it's a reverse DC. I mean, it's basically the same thing, right? You're counting down instead of counting up. I think that's okay. And it definitely, the only thing I will say that guarantees that you will eventually reach it. Okay, and as strange as it may sound, when you, let's say that and I'm assuming that the value of the underclock would be known to the party. But like my only problem with that, my only problem with the underclock method. So by the way, so if I'm reading this correctly, just from what they've written, in the pool, is that like, you start with a value like 20 and then you roll a d6. Let's say we roll a 4 and then it goes down to 16. And at 0, there's some sort of encounter. So then you roll another d6 and you get a 6 and it goes down to 10. And then you roll a 2 and it goes down to an 8. So the problem I have with this, if the players are aware of it, is they know there's no chance that the next roll will generate an encounter. And then I roll a 6 and they get a 2. And for all intents and purposes, they basically know that the next time I roll the dice, there's going to be an encounter. And which is fine, but it almost is a little bit too certain. Now, granted, not to say that having a big pile of D6 doesn't, to a certain point accomplish the same thing. But there's always that, like, there's that hope of spring eternal. And this is one of the reasons why I said that in my system, and again, I didn't do any sort of math. I didn't try to figure it out. I was just strictly going off of, like, vibes when I was doing it, when I was running the game, is when the D6 or whatever was in the pool would roll a 1, I would remove it from the dice pool, which is a way to sort of represent the fact that, like, the tension, if it goes for long enough, the tension can sort of decay. I also really liked using the pool as a lever and a knob with my players. Okay, my players might do something really, really clever or good that would sort of reduce the sort of danger that they were in, and I could reflect that by removing dice from the pool. And strictly based off of the 8 PCs or whoever that were in that game, the feedback, generally speaking, was that felt very satisfying. Okay, to do something clever or to do something, smart, and to watch the GM, right, remove the dice, okay, or vice versa, right, which is, they did something really stupid, as Avison is saying, right, and, boom, here comes the dice. So, Forbidden Lands has the idea of the same thing of sort of diminishing dice. The only reason is because, for me, I literally thought of it as an analog of tension, of danger, of how deep into it you were. And so for me, physically, it made more resonance sense to have this idea of the threat growing. Does that make sense? The threat is growing. So, and again, I didn't have any hard and fast rules. And while typically I would just add D6, because that's typically, I actually used casino, craps dice.
Apex tip
Hey,
$10
Apex.
I know random encounters are a sacred cow, but
They
what
are.
about differently shaped sticks? What if the tension builds up and can affect the _next encounter, instead of spawning a random one?
Yeah, Apex, we can talk about what does a random encounter mean. I will say that from your point here, when you say the next encounter, I think it's important that we sort of stipulate what that means. You mean like the next dungeon encounter period? And the reason I say that is because I admit, this is me trying to harness my inner Evan long before I ever knew Evan, which is that I'm trying to do a lot of work with one mechanic. And so while I think that random encounters can be a great tool for building up that sort of gamist tension and to sort of make the players feel like they're under the clock, which is what I want them to feel like, I also think it's a great simulationist storytelling device. And it's not just, here's a bunch of monsters. I think that the random encounter table, and I've talked about this in prior streams, is a great way of doing what I call environmental storytelling. By having the random encounter table represent the kind of factions, the type of monsters, maybe one particularly deadly monster that is in the dungeon. As a GM, I don't have to make an encounter with the Hydra or whatever, I can instead have the Hydra be on the random encounter table. And I can trust that the random encounter table will help sort of tell the story of this creature, right? Of this thing. So, and sort of to give you an example of this, well, I think remember, mine's building up, Avicen. But as I said before, while I normally used D6, right? I normally used casino dice, crap dice. You could go down, but I do remember one particular instance where I think Bob did something particularly like loud and obnoxious, and it was very, Bob-like. I remember being like reaching behind my screen, and everyone's like, "Oh no, Derek's about to add some D6 to the Doom pool," and I added D12s instead, and everyone was like groaning, but Bob was also kind of like, "Okay, I deserve that. You got me. You totally just made that up, but I totally, you totally got it. Now I do see. I think Evan, again, my chat got cut off, which is this idea that we could use something like a 6+. Instead of looking for totals, right? We could look for 6s. Okay. Now that in of itself is not a bad idea, but again, the whole reason we're on this tangent. And by the way, like I'm supposed to go to a UFC fight tonight, so this might actually be a short stream, but maybe we'll bring it back tomorrow. We'll do Sunday Dark too. This is good. This is a good conversation. This is the kind of conversation that I need to have because again, of course I could just make a dungeon. That's what everybody else does, right? I could just make a dungeon. I could fill it full of monsters and rooms and cool vibes, and then just use this rule that Kelsey came up with for her Shadowdark game. And that would be probably, not only would that probably be 90% plus fine, it would actually probably be better for other people. But you know what? That's why other people don't have a YouTube channel, and I do, because I think about this stuff, and I try to think about the play pattern that these game mechanics create, and how can we use these mechanics to do better gaming experiences and better storytelling. And so, any case, I got distracted. I was thinking about something, but yes, okay. We could do something where we look for like 6s, and that could be some sort of the idea of how dangerous is the encounter. I don't mind that. Now, keep in mind, all we're talking about here, okay, is the frequency, not necessarily the severity. And I think that's important to note, okay? So because, you know, for again, and this isn't a Derekism, this is a classic D&Dism. The original AD&D second edition random encounter tables was after you generated a random encounter. And I should, by the way, point out that AD&D second edition actually used a percentage system. Actually, let's go to the source here. You know you're fucking up when you're referencing AD&D second edition. Here we go. Random encounters, page 96. All right. Yeah, it's based off of the environment that you're in and how likely it is. So let me see if I actually have my AD&D second edition. PDF. I might. We reference everything here. We use everything. And again, I grew up. This is the version of D&D that I grew up playing. So, dungeon. Master's Guide. Good God. What are the odds that this is a Dungeon Master's Guide? Dungeon Master's Guide 2, 5e. I have no idea. All right, I'm going to open up a bunch of these, and maybe one of them will be second edition. Hey, look at that. The very first one I opened. Oh, we had the third edition one. There's also that. No, that's the third. That's the 3.0. I think this is the 3.5. Very subtle difference, but it is a thing. Hey, there we go. Okay, so this is AD&D second edition. Now again, this is you know what I grew up playing with. So if we look here, this is the per the DMG of second edition. This is the encounter chance. I believe that this is on a D6. Yes. This lists the number or less that must be rolled on a D10 for an encounter to occur. So the idea was that you had a greater chance of having an encounter in a swamp than, say, you did in a desert or a plains. Whereas in a forest, it was a 2 in 10. In a swamp, it was a 4 in 10. And then the day was divided into these chunks of time, and you would make one check at some point during those times. So you can see that, you know, in the Arctic, you only made a check in the afternoon and early evening, whereas you made 6 checks per day in the jungle. No, sorry, in the swamp. So that's the frequency and chance of wilderness encounter. Now, on top of that, here is the so that's the chance for an encounter to occur. Okay, and then this is the table of what you would add. This is the 2 through 20 table. So this is a 2d10, but you could also use a d8 plus a d12. So that's actually another way that you can get this table. And as you can see, what this ends up producing is a very, you know, you get a bell curve. Someone was like, oh, no, it's actually a triangle curve, but whatever. But you can see that because you're using 2 dice, things in the middle are much more common to show up, whereas things that are at the outskirts are very, very rare. Now, it also says if you wanted to, you could also use percentage ranges. Some people are more more comfortable with that, right? Where you can say, hey, if you want, you could say, well, camels are the most common thing, so we'll just say 1 to 11, and then you can just make a D100 roll, which is also completely fair. Now, one of the things that I started doing, and I originally learned this from Necromancer Games back in 2000 from 3rd edition, is I like creating these sort of random encounter tables and then putting bonuses or penalties to the table depending on what's happening. Now, it's not always the case, but generally, very generally, what I like to do is I like to put, this is me historically speaking, I like to put theoretically beneficial encounters here at the bottom of the chart. Okay. I guess you could do it the other way, but yeah, Mowat, Mowat definitely did this, Dr. Waite, but I remember reading it in like Lost City of Baracus. I remember reading it in Tomb of Abithor. Tomb of Abithor might be the first one I really remember reading it in, or like Hall of the Rainbow Mage. Like a lot of the early Necro games did. Dr. Waits, by the way, wrote for Necromancer games. So what I liked to do is make a table where things that are very low, okay, are potentially good for the players, okay, and things that are very high are very dangerous to the players, okay. And what I might do is if we, again, I've done this before, but I guess bear with me. So we might have something like, man, I like to throw. I put it in my DM screen. Okay, so we might have something here where, like, let's say we're outdoors, right? We're like outdoors. We're in the dark forest. Okay. So what we can do is we can put a 21, a 22, a 23, and a 24 here. And we can also put like a 1 and a 0 on here as well. And again, let's just assume here that we're rolling 2d10, or we could be also rolling a d8 plus d12. Someone asked, what does this do to the distribution of the dice? I don't know. These might be very equivalent. I'd have to do a simulation, but instinctively, this is 4.5 plus 6.5, so the average is 11. It's still, I don't know. But so we're outdoors. We're in the dark forest. Okay. There we go. Oh, there you go. It has a flat top. Perfect. Okay, cool. That is actually nice to know. That makes actually complete sense. Yes, of course, because you max out the 8. So there you go. So you get a flat top. It's the reason, by the way, that I like a D20 plus D6 and having this represent your thing, because the D20 plus D6 distribution looks like this, basically, right? So this is like 2, and this is 26. And then this is everything in between. So it's very low chance of getting a 2, very low chance of getting a 26, and then it builds up to this big, long, flat top. And everything in this range has the exact same, bonus. So it's fundamentally, like if you had D20 plus, let's just say 3, you're going to get roughly the same values most of the time. But every value from 4 to 23 is as likely, whereas D20 plus D6, your extremes, extreme low and your extreme highs, have diminished chances, which I like. So that is the difference between those two distributions. Anyways, so this is our chart, and up here, okay, we might have like quote unquote like we might have like the good stuff, and down here we have like the really bad stuff. And this might be a quote unquote low level zone. So on 24, we might have something like a Death Knight patrol, right? Like a squadron of armed and armored and riding undead horses Death Knights. And at 0, right, we might have, a unit of the King's Guard. Which in theory is, players are like, oh, thank God. right? And this is a dangerous forest. But here's what we can do, right? We could do something like this. We can do something like this. We could do something like +2 if nighttime, +2 if off road, or maybe it's better to say -2 if on the road. We'll put that. And then we'll say +2 if moonless, right? Or cloudy. So what have we created here? Well, by doing this, if we are on the road, okay, we will never encounter the Death Knight Patrol, even if it's nighttime. The only chance that we'll encounter the Death Knight Patrol is if it's a cloudless, moonless night. And even then, it's still very rare. On the other hand, the only time we're ever going to encounter a unit of the King's Guard is if it's during the day and we're on the road. Right? The King's Guard doesn't go off, their patrols don't go off into the woods, nor do they patrol at night. We might encounter one during the day. Now, it's still pretty rare. I mean, after all, we're adventurers. We wouldn't be going to someplace, quote unquote, safe, right? But just by creating these little modifiers, okay, and by the way, this isn't some secret that the GM should keep to themselves. This is the type of mechanics that my players learn. They learn this in town. Like, for example, I might have an NPC or, some sergeant in the King's Guard say like, yes, we don't get out much past the towns. We don't get much past the outlying villages. Sometimes you might see a unit of the King's Guard out in the woods, but they don't venture out at night and never stray far from the road. And I'll tell the players, hey, if you get a 0, okay, you get the units of King's Guard, but, you get a -2 if you're on the road. So the only way you're ever going to encounter them is on the road, and even then it's a pretty rare thing. So you could see, like, how you can sort of shift what this table does by just telling the players these modifiers, And I like for my players to not only learn the makeup of these tables. In fact, I historically give my players a blank table with the title of the area, the region, the dungeon, and I have the 2 through 20 listed on it. And I'll even sometimes put, VR, R, U, C, U, R, VR, right? Very rare. But then also I give them a separate little area where they can track the modifiers. So this is what I call dynamic environmental storytelling, right? I'm using gamist/simulationism to create automatic storytelling. And it's done in a way that the mechanics and the fiction feed and weave into one another. And blah, blah, blah. And it just, as a GM, it gives me a lot of ideas. Like, I don't necessarily have to be thinking, like, the players might do something, okay? And they might, I don't know, they find some ancient druid grove in the woods. They complete a ritual that reawakens the primal spirits of the woods, causing an awakening and blah, blah, blah. And I might, replace some of the frequency with some of these creatures now with like dryads or treants, representing the fact that the players have awakened, sort of the thing. I might tell the players that now there's like a blanket +1 or -1 to all encounters in the woods because they've sort of awakened, the creatures have been awakened, right? So it's a way for me to tie the players' actions in the fiction to the stuff. Now, people might say, Derek, that's really gamist. Maybe it is, but it's kind of also part of the history of D&D. So like, there's these things where people go, that's too gamist for the OSR. And I go, well, what is the OSR? Because this is AD&D. Is AD&D not the OSR? And I've sometimes accused, I'm willing to be proven wrong, the OSR of being revisionist in their historical attempts and portraying a world and an idea that didn't actually exist. Because in my experience, playing in the 90s and the late 80s, I mean, I was a kid in the late 80s, but certainly 90s, games of the AD&D were pretty gamist, you know, and we were talking about tables and encounter checks, and, you know, we were talking about that stuff. We were talking about number appearing and how many hit dice the monsters had, and, you know, could the cleric turn that undead? I don't know. We'll see how many hit dice I roll, yada, yada, yada. You know, I can't fight them. I don't have a +1 weapon, yada, 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 right? So, Edenism says, I would love the OSR if I could figure out the definition. Now, that's not to say that, you know, because I don't think that just because you're talking about game mechanics. Now, some folks believe that, you know, immersion and gameism are counter-purposed to one another, you know? That, you know, and Ken has a great question. When does immersion simply just become nostalgia? It's a great question, Ken, you know? And I'm not here to try to say that you're doing it wrong. But now, you know, coming from the recent Kimo Osabi master, you know, Nimble says, I think you have an obviously good sense of what is fun. Do what you think is cool. Don't worry about justifying decisions to everyone. You know, Nimble, I would never say, one of the last things I ever want to do is design a game by committee. I think when games are designed by committee, I think that's how you end up with like PF2 and 5th edition D&D and stuff. Right, it's like it's appealing to everyone, but it's not really great for anyone. So that's never my concern. What I'm really here to do is I'm not trying to justify this. I'm simply trying to, you know, that's what my channel here is to do, is to get people to think about the decisions, and get people to realize that these decisions are being made for a reason. Now, you can disagree that reason may not, you know, you might say that reason doesn't apply to me, ergo your logic doesn't apply to me, and your game design doesn't apply to me. But I would never say that these things are being done, you know, for willy-nilly purposes. Anyways, long story short, because like I said, I am supposed to go somewhere. Yes, single bean. A lot of OSR arguments boil down to no true Scotsman type stuff, and I would agree with you, except that the problem with it is, if you look at those old school modules, if you look at, you know, games like AD&D, they were fairly gamist. There was a lot of tables and modifications. I mean, look at this table. I love this table. Hold on a second. You know, we were talking about encounter reactions the other day. I mean, by the way, you can see here that, like, you can see that as you go deeper into the dungeon level, the creature levels go up, right? And they talk about here about how dungeon encounter tables are normally set up according to levels. Each level is a relative measure of the power of the creatures on it. In general, the level of the table corresponds to character levels. And although characters may encounter and defeat or be challenged by creatures from higher or lower level tables, which is important, generally, when adventuring in a dungeon, characters should meet random encounters that are equal to or no more than 2 levels higher or lower than their own. So, again, this game is from 1989, which I think would definitely qualify it as OSR. Dr. Stevel says, back in AD&D first edition, in 70s and early 80s, we were obsessed about which treasure table we got to roll on, right? You're like, come on, let me get treasure table A. Let me get table A. And for those of you who have no idea what Dr. Stevel and I are talking about, the original D&D game had these crazy tables that were referenced by letter, and different monsters rolled on different tables, and that generated different types of treasure. So you can see that if you rolled on treasure type A, you were 40% likely to get 1,000 to 6,000 gold. You were 35% likely to get 300 to 1,800 electrum. You were 60% likely to get 10 to 40 gems, yada, yada. And more importantly, you were 30% likely to get any 3 magical items. So this was, you know, obviously, now, of course, obviously, table H, you know, was, you know, or arguably table H, I guess, was the best. I mean, it depends on what you were looking for, right? But so case in point, you wanted the A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. You wanted this stuff, and you might say, oh, this is no. Different creatures on the monster manual were connected to these different letters, and that told you what to roll. In other words, there were certain creatures in the game that just gave you better treasure. Case in point, dragons gave you better treasure than non-dragons. So, yeah. Anyways, and again, this isn't just like some suggestion. This is how the game worked. Again, I think random treasure is awesome and amazing, and I think it's fun and exciting, and you don't know which direction the game is going to go. And Boofy says, "I so miss random treasure." So do I. I think it's honestly the most exciting thing for me. As when we played, my players always knew the treasure types. Even when we played 3rd edition D&D, which obviously we did for a good 10 years. We would roll. I would have my players roll this percentage. Now, 3rd edition. The big change with 3rd edition is that the treasure tables were now by level, okay? And they were technically tied to encounter level instead of being tied to this abstract notion of, of treasure type. But my players would be 10th level, and I'd be like, okay, guys, roll percentage for coins. And they're like, roll high, roll high, roll high. I want to get the platinum. I want to get the platinum. And then I'd be like, okay, roll for gems. And they'd be like, roll high, roll high. I want gems or valuable art objects. And then, of course, obviously the final table was roll high, roll high. I want to get a magical item. And what's interesting about this table from 3rd edition D&D is that if you did say get a magical item, okay, like a minor, a medium, or a major. Let's say Boothby's rolling, and boom, gets the gets the sick roll of a 90. So you guys are going to be generating a medium magical item. Well, guess what? Then we go to the table here to generate what kind of item it might be, and there was a 10% chance that it was going to be a weapon. Well, guess what? When you generated a random weapon, you rolled on, you guessed it, the random weapon table. But not just the random weapon table, okay? Because it's a medium. Now, very low chance that it was just going to be a +1 weapon. In fact, most of the time, it was going to be a +3 weapon or a +4 weapon, and even a potential chance for a specific special ability and roll again. Now, a special ability could be something like frosting, flaming, shocking, bonus. You could basically roll really well and keep rolling really well and generate some obscene item. But not only that, here's what's really interesting, folks. You had to roll to see what the magical item was. Now note, 70% of the time it was on the common melee weapon. Only 20% of the time was it on even a ranged weapon, and only 10% of the time was it an uncommon weapon. And even within the common melee weapons, look at this. A longsword was 5 times as likely to be a magical item as, say, a quarterstaff or a nunchuck. In fact, if you look at this table, you will see that most of the magical items are going to be great axes, great swords, long swords, bastard swords, and dwarven war axes. In fact, if you wanted to, if your stupid, dumb character is like, oh, I'm a master of the dire flail. To get the dire flail, you would have to first roll between 71 and 80 to get just to even roll on the uncommon magical item table. Then you would roll on this, the uncommon weapons title. And your stupid spiked chain or whatever had only a 3% chance after rolling the 10% chance. So that means it was 3% of 10%. So you only had a 0.3% chance of getting your stupid, basically anything that's on this list. Oh, I use a
Edward
whip.
tipped $10.
What is wrong with you?
I hope I'm not interrupting. I can't watch live, but Evan just posted that he found an inbuilt engineering mechanic from watching this stream. So here's some money. Hashtag Professor Derek.
Hey, Edward, thank you so much. Well, Evan was in here earlier, and he was definitely he was getting some ideas from both me and from chat. So I'm not sure what he stole or what he's going to take from this stream. But I'm glad it was inspiration. But thank you for that. So yeah, we were talking about that. But because we were talking about the reverse clock and we were talking about tension pools and all this other stuff. So you know what? That's awesome. Yes, your weapon is dumb and you should feel dumb. And Malum, correct. It did make getting a magic whip or a magic scythe that much cooler. Correct. It's like, look, hey, if you have one of these stupid dumb items, if you do find it randomly, good for you. But I should also point out that this is 3rd edition is an example of a tension that didn't exist in the prior edition of the game, because we were coming from we were coming from AD&D, right? We were coming from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, 1st edition, and then this is obviously from 2nd edition. But guess what? If you were a fighter in 2nd edition, it didn't matter what kind of weapon you used, because there wasn't really, in AD&D, there wasn't. I've invested 17 feats in, spiked chain. This is one of our favorite examples of how dumb prestige classes were in 3rd edition. Some of you may remember that there was even a prestige class, and it was called like the Chain Master. And it was like a prestige class entirely dedicated to the spiked chain. And, one of the things that I always thought was cool about the fighter in old school D&D was you're like, yep, I'm a sword and board guy. You go into the dungeon and you find an insane magical gauntlet. And you're like, well, I guess I'm punching ogres now, because the sword, I'm sheathing that. And now my character has this big flaming like Hellboy, I've got like a +2 flaming burst, whatever, some completely randomized massive gauntlet. We would punch it up. Now, you're not wrong. In 2nd edition, we started to see that breakaway, Dr. Waits, because of AD&D, You're correct, from AD&D, because you did have specialization and you got the extra attacks. You are correct. So, Laughing Out Loud says, I will bug and beg the GM for my special weapon until they give in or kill my character. And, that's, I'm not trying to, I think the game designers were responding to, the problems or complaints that they were seeing from players, which is like, why aren't you giving me my special loot? And and again, they weren't wrong. People weren't wrong to complain about that, because here's the game, 3rd edition D&D, that's saying, hey, you took weapon focus, longsword. You took weapon specialization, longsword. You took greater weapon focus, longsword. You took greater weapon specialization, longsword. You took improved critical, longsword. So you've invested 5 feats into your longsword. Any of these other items do nothing. And you're right. PF2 has transferable runes. You are also completely correct that it is a total cop-out. Now, it is the easiest solution to this problem, but I think it loses all meaning and flavor, And Eden, I think I completely agree with you, which is to say 3rd edition did so many good things for the character, but the rest of the game didn't keep up. And I think that in many ways, D&D still suffers from this problem, where some parts of the game highly evolve and maybe try to keep up with the times, and other parts of the game, considerably lag behind. So like Avison. So let's say Boothby, let's do it. All right, Boothby gets a random weapon. I got some percentage dice here. I wish I had a bot that would let me roll dice in chat. maybe can my bot? There's got to be something I could do with my bot that can do that. But all right. Let's see what we get here. We've already established it's a weapon. Okay, here we go. It's a medium weapon. So I'm going to roll this. Okay, we got 73. So it's a special ability and roll again. All right, I'm going to roll again. All right, it's a 72. So it's a special ability and roll again. All right, it's a 27. Okay, so it's a +3 with 2 special abilities. So now we'll roll, and this is on the medium table. Actually, we have to roll to see what kind of weapon it is first. All right, it is a 17, so it's a common melee weapon. It's a 24, so it is a great sword. All right, so we have a +3 great sword with 2 special abilities. Now, it is a melee weapon, so we're going to roll on the melee weapon special abilities table. It's a medium, so we're going to roll on the medium table, and it's a full-out D100. Let's go, baby. Let's get the roll again twice. Here we go. All right, our first roll is an 81. It's holy. That's plus 2d6 versus evil creatures. Obvious damage. Our second roll, 72. Thundering. So we have a +3 holy thundering greatsword. That's what we just randomly generated. And again, I really do think that the community in many ways is split. And I used to say it might be split 50-50, but now it's probably split 80-20, which is to say there are those who think that what just happened was awesome. And there are other people who think that is really, really horrible. And not only the people who think it's really horrible, not only do they think they either think it's horrible because they go, oh my God, what if nobody uses a great sword? Or there's people who think it's so horrible because, oh my God, did you just roll an extremely busted, powerful, magical item? So there's 2 ways of thinking of it, right? Yes, correct, Boothby. I sell it for half. That is exactly what would happen. So like I said, 3rd edition did have its problems, right? And again, you're right. Boothby's playing a monk. He was hoping for the nunchuck, so he sells it for half, and instead gets a +2 nunchuck. That fits his character better. And Dr. Stevel, you're completely not wrong. But this is the problem, you know. Oh, actually, you know what? Hold on a second. We got to roll. We're not done. I completely skipped this. I spec for Flick Mace. I completely forgot this. This is 3rd edition, by the way. This is not AD&D 1st edition. This, my friends, is 3rd edition. We forgot something. Special qualities. Roll D percentage. If we roll 20%, it indicates that the item sheds light. If we roll a 21 to 25, the weapon is intelligent. If we roll a 26 to 35, the weapon is intelligent and it sheds light. A 36 to 50 indicates that something on the weapon provides a clue to its function, and a 51 to 100 indicates no special qualities. Let's go. $31. All right, our weapon is intelligent and it sheds light. Okay, so now we have to roll on the intelligent item table. God help me, I don't remember where that is. I think it's at the bottom. I think it's at the end of the magical item section. There we go. All right. Where is the intelligent item? That's artifacts. Does anybody remember where the... Here it is. Okay, we got it. All right. All right. The tables below should be determined the properties of an intelligent item, the number of powers, unusual properties, alignment of the items. Of the 3 mental ability scores, 2 are favored, 2d6 plus some number, and 1 is completely random. Choose which scores, get assigned which numbers, or roll a d4. So we're going to roll a d4. We get All right, we got a 4. So the high score of our holy greatsword that is thundering, okay, is charisma. That feels awesome. It's Paladin's weapon, right? Ooh, 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 ooh. What if it's the spirit? What if it's the soul of an ancient paladin, okay, who in death chose, almost like a dreadnought from 440k, what if they chose to instead have their spirit bound into the sword to await, like a master sword, to await the next hero to fulfill some awesome destiny? Okay, anyways, their medium score is intelligence, their low score is wisdom. All right. The GM is encouraged to design unusual magical items for specific feats. All right, so then we got to determine its alignment. Now, to be clear, this could fuck our shit up, but let's see what we get here. All right, 76. All right, it's neutral good. All right, so the paladin has lost some of their lawfulness. You know, they're more just concerned about the things that are happening here. Okay, I'm going to roll a percentage here. We got a 74. It has 2 ability scores at 2d6 plus 7 and 1 at 3d6. It is capable of speech. It has 2 primary abilities. Okay? I'm not actually going to roll its stats, but needless to say. All right, so these are its primary abilities. And it doesn't have any special power or extraordinary powers. All right, so we're going to roll for its 2 special abilities. Okay, we got 9. Roll twice. So we have 3 primary abilities. Oh, no, 91 is not roll twice. Roll on the extraordinary powers instead. Okay, so we have 1 primary ability and 1 extraordinary ability. Okay, 58. The wielder has free use of evasion. So if we pass a reflex save, we take no damage. Good for fighting dragons. Maybe it's a dragon slayer. All right, let's see what its extraordinary power is. All right, 42. It can cast lightning bolt once a day for 8d6 points of damage, 200-foot range. Now look, does this make any sense? No, we just made this up. But for me, the fun of role-playing games is taking, well, so I have a couple ideas. Is taking random elements and figuring out ways to, oh shit, you're right, it's a thundering weapon. Holy crap, Malum, how did I miss that? You're right. That's awesome. That fits perfectly. I was thinking that didn't fit at all, but you're completely correct. So here's what I might say. Because of the style of this weapon, I might say that it's a lightning bolt. It uses the lightning bolt template, but instead of doing electricity damage, what if it does holy damage instead? What if it's white lightning? What if it's a holy bolt of heavenly thunder, right? Instead, we could take that lightning bolt concept, or we can change it, right, and make it holy lightning. So it's truly something unique for this power. And now we've got this holy sword of thundering vengeance, okay, that's maybe the soul of an ancient paladin that's 1,000 years old, okay, a dragon slayer. And in fact, remember, this thing gives you evasion, but we don't have to think of it like evasion, right? Evasion just means if you pass your reflex save, you take no damage. That's all it means mechanically, right? That's all evasion. It's called evasion, but it doesn't actually mean evasion. That's just the name of the ability, right? Our evasion could literally be that when fireballs and breath weapon strike us, we like raise our sword and like the flames part around us. Okay, and it literally is like a shield, right, of energy surrounding us that protects us when like the fireball hits us. You know, it's almost like, you know, that scene like when Gandalf deflects the Balrog's flaming attack, and you kind of see the flamingness energy kind of like ripple off of him, almost like sheets of fire. It could be something like that, right? And this is a random fucking item that we just generated out of the DMG. Now I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to say that this item was way cooler than any item in your last campaign or in my last campaign. So there you go, you know? And that is, now, on the other hand, we could have gotten a +1 dagger. So like, right? that's the downside, is that when you get an item like this, it really is special, right? It really is fun. Somebody said I should roll it again and see if we get something another winner. Okay, this will be perfect because I'm sure we're gonna get regression to the mean. We will do. Do you roll on the item table fairly often? Yeah, I mean, once you get higher level, Avison, you absolutely do. There we go. So you can see that once you get to, once you get, look at this. I mean, once you're level 11, every encounter has a really good chance of generating at least a couple minor items, right? 32 to 84% minor items. As you get into the teens, you're gonna, every couple of encounters, you might get a medium item, and then you even start to get chances for major items. Obviously, it never gets. I mean, at the end of the game, you're basically generating them with every roll. But all right, well, we'll roll again. It'll be a medium weapon. So here we go, medium weapon. All right, 49. Okay, so this is just a +3 weapon. Now, it doesn't have any special abilities. It's just a +3 weapon. Oh, okay, 90. It's a ranged weapon. '81. It is a +3 mighty composite longbow. That's what we just rolled. Yes, Avison. It's just correct. Edenism says, when would you decide to ignore the random tables? Almost never. That's just me. Got to be honest. Sometimes I just choose for my own fun as a GM and rolls within reason. I mean, Edenism, I mean, look, I think it can be fun to follow the fiction. Like, for example, me deciding to change the lightning bolt damage from electricity to holy. I think that's cool within reason. I think it feels very flavorful. I think it feels a lot of fun. But I find that when we pick things, we just end up with things that are safe, I mean, yes, sometimes we want to pick things that are make more sense and are cool and give the player what they're looking for. And all that is fine. It's fun. But I don't know. There's something really special. I'll also point out, Edenism, that I, as the GM, never roll these tables. I never, ever have any of this pre-rolled. I always let my players roll it. And while my players may not know the exact table, most of my players, back in the day at least, were GMs. They knew roughly what the percentages were. So, it's not like, and so if they rolled a 92, they knew they were getting something nice. If they rolled a 10, they knew they were getting something, quote unquote, bad. But yeah, you know what, Malum, that's a great point. That's just a nice, easy backup weapon for the fighter. They throw their +3 longbow on their back, and that's a great, secondary beacon. Yeah, I mean, Sveti, there's a reason. Sveti's 100% right. There's a reason we have GMs, and we're not just a computer. We're just literally spitting out nonsense. I think that there's a certain point where a common sense can do some overriding. All I'll say is, this is like a gym metaphor, okay? And I always thought this was really strange until I started noticing it and paying more attention to people in the gym. When right now I'm not in my gym era, but back in the day when I was like a guy who lifted a lot, I would lift, and I would find a place where I could lift, and I would try to lift nearly to failure or until that last rep of the set was so difficult that maybe I could do one more if you put a gun to my head. And, the people say that's where growth occurs, right? When you're uncomfortable. And I thought, well, what else would that happen? And then I noticed when I go to the gym, I see people who go, okay, I'm here to do 10 reps today. They sit down, they do their 10 reps, they can do their 10 reps, and then they're done. And they think, oh, I just did the thing, so I'm doing the lifting. And the reality is they didn't grow at all. The reason your muscles get bigger is because you're doing something that is at just at or beyond what they are capable of doing. And so your body sends a stimulus and says, you need to grow. You need to be stronger, because if you do something that is within your capability, it doesn't matter how much you really do it within reason, you're not going to grow. So I think the same thing is true for GMing. I think that, giving yourself an uncomfortable stimulus forces you to grow and develop. And I think that that's something that I think we should, we could all learn from in that respect. Yeah, I think you're right, Sweet Threat. Hey, this is what we got. And then someone's like, oh, that's so cool. Like, okay, what if it's holy lightning? They're like, yeah, that's amazing. It goes without saying, but one of our favorite items that we ever had from one of our campaigns is we rolled a wand of lightning bolt. And we rolled and it was cursed. Okay. This is by the way, the random chance that the item is cursed. What's up, Clobster? Good to have you, buddy.
Clobster roll tip $25. Filled out the survey for the community games, and I know I don't have the most silver/golden tickets, but I found some of these green tickets lying around. Wink, wink. This is a joke, BTW.
Oh, that's Clobster. Listen, hey, buddy. You have gold tickets. You're an exalted. That gives you a lot of clout. And when I come up with the rules, Clobster, I appreciate you. By the way, for people who are like exalted or whatever, if there's a game that you really want to get into, I'm okay with people going potentially negative, especially if you're signed up for like a whole year. Like if you buy the discounted year package, because then I know that you're going to earn those tickets. And so, if you want to get into a 6-session or a 12-session game, that gives me a lot more things. Because the thing that the gold ticket's going to let you do is it's going to let you basically get first right of refusal. Right, the legends and the exalteds with gold tickets, I should say, anybody with gold tickets are going to have the ability to get slots first, and then whatever's left over will kind of go into the general population. But I try not to just sell. I know it's pedantic, but I try not to like sell sessions. Like, yes, you're buying tickets through your Patreon membership, but I don't really look at it that way. I look at it more as a gift. I know. I'm being very maybe delusional about it, but I try not to just be like, yep, it's $100 or whatever like that. Like I know Luke from DM Slayer, who, by the way, he told me at GaryCon that he was going to basically quit YouTube, and I just saw that he posted a video like 2 days ago that basically says, this is it, I'm done. And I was like, oh shit, he followed through. Okay, respect. But I saw him posting. He has games posted on Start Playing that are $100 per player per session or something, and I was like, respect to him, but like I don't want to like get into that kind of high level of transactional thing. Anyways, sorry, but thank you, Clopster Roll. I appreciate it. The green tickets are very appreciated, Clopster. But I just want to say the gold tickets are appreciated too, because that means you're a member of the Patreon and you're supporting me every month, and it means a lot. We had a very famous wand where it was a wand of lightning bolts, and the curse was opposite effect. And we were like, well, what's the opposite effect of a lightning bolt? We're like, well, I guess it heals. And so it became this wizard item, a wand, that shot out a lightning bolt that did 5d6 healing in a lightning bolt. Obviously, it also did damage to undead because it was, healing. But it was really funny. It changed this game in a radical way, because the guys would be playing and then the wizard be like, I move over here and shoot the party with a healing lightning bolt, and suddenly our wizard could heal, and they could heal as an AoE line. It was very strange, but it all happened because of this random result of a cursed wand of lightning bolt that randomly had the opposite effect. I don't remember I think we described it as being like a line of swirling green energy, as I recall. Kind of looked like Livestream from Final Fantasy VII, if I recall correctly. So yeah, for me, those, lightning helix, Avison. If it had done regular damage and normal damage, that would have been pretty cool too. But no, ours, it was just healing. So like if it hit enemies, they got healed too, to be clear. In fact, I remember not like an argument, but there was a point to be made, which is that the wizard shot the bolt and an enemy was in the way and was going to get healed. And I think it was probably Smith, said, well, wouldn't the enemy doesn't know that it's a healing lightning bolt, even if it does look weird. wouldn't they naturally try to get out of the way? And I was like, you know what? That's a great point. So the enemy made their reflex save anyways, passed, and took half damage, which is to say they received half the healing. You know what? And I as a GM, I'm not going to lie to you. I like those conversations. I like having those conversations at the table. I think they're funny. I think they're memorable. I think they add to the experience. And I know what some people might say they ruin the immersion. For me, the immersion isn't important. It's the engagement. It's that we can all be like, we're all focusing on the game. And that's what's fun for me. You know, that's the part that I'm here to play. So, you know, maybe it's because I play a lot of card games and board games and all these other things that immersion has never been something that I aspire to. I don't know if I go as far as some game devs and say it's like dangerous, but it's definitely not something I aspire to. All right. Well, I'm supposed to be at this UFC event at 10. And it's 9:50. So what I'm going to say is I'm going to wrap it up there for tonight. But we'll pick this up tomorrow. So, I mean, we didn't really get a whole lot done. I mean, we obviously did what we normally do, which is, discuss a lot of theory and engagement, apparently help some other game designer come up with their decision for their game. Classic. But again, we're going places. And I guess the long and the short of it is I'm okay with a certain level of gameism in my games as long as I feel like they tie to what we're doing, tie to the fiction, and advance and increase the play experience that we're trying to go for. If a gameist mechanic feels like it's procedural and takes you out of the moment, I think that's a bad thing. I'll agree to that. If it's gameist just to be gameist, I think that takes you out of it. But what I'm really trying to do with something like an escalating doom pool or something like that is build that tension to increase that emotional engagement. Now, you may not call it immersion, but I think engagement is a better goal anyways. And I hope that what I've just proven through rolling these completely random 3rd edition magical items is that gameist mechanics can add to the narrative. I'll also say one thing before I leave. Now we're weird. We're weird people. You're weird. I'm weird. Do you all agree that we could have fun as a stream, right? As a community, we could probably have fun, not like every stream, but we could probably have fun as a community, just randomly rolling a random item or two, like every stream, right? And using that and creating some kind of cool, fun little, story and fiction and tying it into something and seeing what we get. And that's what I'm trying to say is I think that's fun. Is that immersion? Is that immersiveness? No. Is it simulationist? No. Yeah, it's very gameist, but it's fun. I think that's fun. And I think this is fun in a way that going hey, my player is using what weapon? Oh, okay. They're level 8, so they need this rune. They need that rune to be competitive, so I have to give them this rune. I can't give them this rune. That rune's too powerful, right? Because full stop, I don't remember which character it was, so I don't remember this, but I remember there was a level 2 3rd edition party. And they got I want to say it was a shield, okay? It wasn't armor. I think it was a shield. And it was level 2. So very, 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 very rare, okay? And they ended up rolling 90, 83 or something like that. And so they were only level 2, okay? But they ended up with a +2 flight fortification arrow deflecting shield or something at level 2. And it was way more valuable than anything that anyone should have ever had. And that character was I guess I'm Captain America now. I guess this is what my character is about. That wasn't what my character was going to be about. But now it is what my character is about. And some people, again, there's that split in the community. Some people are I would hate that. For me and for my game group, that's always been why we play the game. I can't wait to see how the game and the dice and the randomness take whatever idea I have, crumple it up and throw it away, right? And lead me to somewhere new and interesting and exciting, I would rather be someplace not of my own choosing than someplace that I just picked. And I would rather have these, crazy oddball options to get these really crazy, yeah, you might say, I play to find out. That's correct, Simon. Yeah, right. It allows the game to have a say in the story as well, and I think that's really cool. Now, by the way, there's a lot of games out there that I play where the GM has a lot more authority, where balance and the tightness of the math is way more important and paramount. Where you're playing the game as much for the tactical challenge of overcoming the almost the miniatures game element of the game. And so, yeah, if you just suddenly randomly drop a +5 suit of armor onto a level 2 character, they're basically like, I'm invincible, nothing can ever touch me, and the game is basically over from a tactical challenge perspective. I get it. That's problematic. So, there's a reason that those rules exist. But historically, D&D has never really been that game, and, certainly 3rd edition wasn't, because you had things like touch attacks. Oh, you have a really powerful shield? Great. The basilisk turns you to stone. The Medusa turns you to stone. It's like, oh, shit. Okay. Well, damn. Not to mention, just as an aside, did you know that anytime you rolled a nat 1 on a save, that your magical items could be destroyed? It's true. When you rolled a nat 1 on a saving throw, you had to roll a d4, and it would determine which magical item that you had got hit. And then it had to make a saving throw, and it could die. It could get blown up.
$25. Bring back the tables.
Dr. Stevels says, bring back the tables. I love it. In fact, one of my favorite items, let's see if it's called the Helm of Brilliance. It's a very powerful item, by the way. But Helm of Brilliance has this great, it's like a nuclear missile in helmet form. And I don't know if it still does this in 5th edition. I have no idea what it does in 5th edition. But it's a helm that's encrusted with rubies and diamonds and gems and all this other stuff. If whenever the creature wearing the helm is damaged by magical fire, if you fail an additional will saving throw, all the remaining gems on the helmet overload and detonate. And by the way, there's 30 fireballs in it. So, like, in theory, assuming you hadn't cast any of the fireballs, if you took fire damage and then it failed to save, your helmet exploded and 30 10d6, so was that 300 d6 worth of fireballs blew up on your character sheet. Now, when people talk about, like, character death and all this other stuff, like, that's the kind of crazy random nonsense that I want to have happen. I don't want it to be like, oh, I tripped on a broom, and or a cat scratched me, Yeah, exactly. I cast Scorching Ray. Get fucked, nerd. Right, exactly. Touch attack? What's your touch AC? Oh, 7? Cool. Yeah, Scorching Ray was an awesome spell, Alan. I love Scorching Ray. Scorching Ray is like one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite spells of all time. It was new to 3rd edition. It didn't exist from a prior edition. Not really. It used the touch attack system. I love touch AC. I still do. And yeah. So anyways, 3rd edition's great. So anyways, I'll be back tomorrow. Speaking of fighting, I'm going to go watch some people get punched. Maybe put down a couple $10 bets. And yeah, I'll probably be back tomorrow because this was a lot of fun and we did really well. We crushed both of our tip goals. So we supported Shadowdeep and we have a bonus Sunday stream. So that means we'll do more Shadowdeep tomorrow on Sunday. But thank you, Dr. Stevel. Thank you, Klopster Roll. Thank you, Eden. Thank you, 15 Insight. Thank you, Edward. Thank you, Apex. Thank you, Nimble. Thank you, Junderlin. Thank you to all the folks who subscribe with Prime as well. Winterlance, Borgie, and Forgotten Consoles. By the way, I did. There was a super chat for $35 from 15 Insights. All right. So how does this work with modern systems? And the answer is 15 Insight. Hopefully, I answered it when I was actually doing that. By the way, is it kind of doesn't, no. I'm gambling with the money that I just got, Pumpkin. So that's different. Right. Remember, all my tip money is my spending money. So besides, I make smart bets. The answer is 15 Insight. I don't think it does. Not really. Because when you have a game that's so predicated, that's so careful, I mean, people are obsessed with balance nowadays. And this kind of random items that could be really powerful or really weak or really random or really weird or end up giving you a sword that no one in the party can even use. It can really fuck with the balance, And in a lot of the modern sort of neo trad games, balance is king. And so I think the games struggle. And even in the games where balance maybe isn't as important, right? Fulfilling the player fantasy is. And I don't even just necessarily mean like what's my build, right? Which is obviously a thing, but also like, hey, I got this art made for my character, or I found a mini that looks like my character, and I'm a sword and board character. My character found this two-handed maul, this gigantic hammer that's really powerful and magical, and I don't want to use it because it doesn't match my my mini. Like, I'm not saying that these are brand new concerns. People had miniatures back in the day too, but it's a different world out there, 15 Insight, and so sometimes there's something to be said there, Yeah, Ken. I mean, again, I'm not arguing that gameism can quote unquote take you out of immersion. Now, I may not personally care that much about immersion, but I do think that there is something to be said that gamist rules just for gamist purposes can be very clunky and bothering. I think what's important to note is that sometimes people don't mistake gamist rules as being clunky, and what they're really doing is creating an experience that you maybe you just don't like it, and that's okay. You just might be like, I don't want to do this, and it's like, well, that's kind of the whole point of the game. I go off on a board game rant now, but like people in Agricola were always complaining about like it's too hard to feed your family. Well, that's kind of the point. The point was that it was supposed to be hard to feed your family. But yeah. All right, folks. I will be back tomorrow evening. Maybe we'll go a little bit early or whatever. We'll figure it out. Again, I'm home for the next couple months until Origins, and even then, I might be skipping Gen Con, so I might be home all summer. Pumpkin. You know what? I'm going to end with that because that is the ballerest thing that we said. Pumpkin says, I call clunky game rules simulationist rules. And you know what? With that, we're going to end it. I'll see you next time on Knights of Last Call. Peace out, everybody.